Joining us now here in Washington, Republican presidential candidate Carly Fiorina. Ms. Fiorina, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you for having me.
I want to pick up on exactly that comment that we've referenced a couple of times. Hillary Clinton in the debate saying we are now where we need to be in fighting ISIS.
Incredible, honestly. Somehow a UN resolution about Syria puts us where we need to be. I think it is a reflection of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's belief that our foreign policy gets set by others. This is what leading from behind means, I guess. She failed to mention in last night's debate that her agreement with a precipitous withdrawal and declaration of victory in 2011 helped leave swaths of territory and weaponry from ISIS. She failed to mention that she described Bashar al-Assad as a positive reformer and opened an American embassy. She failed to mention a complete failure strategy in Libya, which now is enabling ISIS to move into Libya. She's gotten every single foreign policy challenge wrong. And no, Mrs. Clinton, we are not where we need to be in the fight against ISIS.
Clinton also focused repeatedly, as Ed mentioned, excuse me, on Donald Trump, almost acting as if he were the only Republican candidate running against her. What did you make of that?
Well, Donald Trump is a big Christmas gift wrapped up under the tree for Hillary Clinton. She desperately hopes she runs against Donald Trump. I, however, am the lump of coal in Mrs. Clinton's stocking, and she desperately hopes she does not run against me.
And why do you think that is, that she would like to run against Trump and not like to run against you?
Well, because she can beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump can't beat Hillary Clinton. I think it's very clear. And she doesn't want to run against me because I can beat her. Because I will fight her, force her to fight on ground that she will lose on. I will force her to fight on the ground of her foreign policy mistakes. I will force her to fight on the ground of her lies and lack of trustworthiness, whether that's about emails and servers and Benghazi. I will reveal to the American people over and over and over again the Clinton way. Say what you have to say to get elected. Lie as long as you can get away with it. She wants to run on the nature of her candidacy. I will force her to run on accountability for the Clinton way.
Let's turn to your debate, the Republican debate this week, in which you talked about how you would fight ISIS. Here's a clip.
Bring back the warrior class. Petraeus, McChrystal, Mattis, Keene, Flynn. Every single one of these generals I know, every one was retired early because they told President Obama things that he didn't want to hear.
Now, it is true that some of those generals did leave over policy differences.
Yes, 4 out of 5. Keene had already left.
Well, 3 out of 5. I mean, Petraeus really left because of a scandal, an extramarital affair, also the mishandling of classified information.
Yes, and by the way, Mrs. Clinton still hasn't been indicted over the same thing. So perhaps Petraeus' dismissal was convenient. I don't know. I would just say that Petraeus and Clinton are being handled very differently by this administration over arguably exactly the same issue, which was the handling of classified information over a personal email.
Okay. But then there's Keene, who never served in the Obama administration, says he's never spoken to Barack Obama. Weren't you just flat wrong about that?
Well, I was wrong about Keene, yes. He's the exception that proves the rule. I was certainly right about the fact that he is a member of the warrior class. I was naming the 5 warriors of our generation who have experience. 4 out of 5, I would argue, were retired early out of the Obama administration because they said things the Obama administration didn't particularly want to hear. But all 5 of these generals have real experience, and all 5 of them have been highly critical of both Mrs. Clinton and Barack Obama, and all 5 of them have said that we are not doing what is necessary to lead and to defeat ISIS.
One of the other points you made is that as president, you would work more closely with the tech world, as you say you did as the head of Hewlett-Packard after 9/11. Here's what you said in the debate.
The private sector will help, just as I helped after 9/11, but they must be engaged and they must be asked. I will ask them. I know them.
But in that case, after 9/11, you were turning over equipment as the head of HP to the government. In what's happening now, we're talking about whether or not to turn over user information, whether or not to unlock encryption. That's a very different ask to be making of these high-tech companies, and they don't want to do it.
Actually, we're talking about other things, Chris, and this is why it's helpful that I understand technology. Hillary Clinton tried to issue the same line last night, by the way, and then quickly had to say, I don't really understand much about technology, because she doesn't. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. When we miss, with all the metadata collection that we have had, the San Bernardino couple and the Tsarnaev brothers, what that suggests to me is that we are using the wrong algorithms to search through all this data. Algorithms have come a long way since 2011 or 2006 or 2007. In fact, the private sector is improving their algorithmic ability to search through big data month after month after month. And of course, a big government bureaucracy isn't keeping up. It's not that people are bad in government bureaucracies. It's that government bureaucracies crush innovation. We are falling further and further behind in our government. And meanwhile, the terrorists are keeping up. We have been through 4 and 5 generations of technology since the Patriot Act. So while lawyers are arguing about the Patriot Act or the America Freedom Act, the point is the terrorists have moved on, the technologists have moved on, and we, the United States, are not taking advantage of the latest and greatest in technology. The terrorists are. We need to get smart about this.
And you clearly have forgotten more about high tech than I ever have known.
But or any of my other opponents in this race have known either.
I suspect that's true. But having said that, it is the case that the government has talked to some of these companies. We're not talking about telecommunications companies. We're talking about companies like Google and Apple, about user information, about giving the key to unlock encryption, and they have refused to do so.
I'm not saying that that isn't true. What I'm saying is the private sector has not been engaged. That's how we can spend billions of dollars.
And Tim Cook, for instance, the head of Apple, has repeatedly refused to give that up.
Tim Cook has been asked a very specific question in public, by the way, and Tim Cook has refused in public. I don't blame him for that. I will guarantee you that there are all kinds of things that the private sector can be doing to be helpful, and they have not been engaged. Let me give you an analogy, Chris. In World War II, and we're at war now. It's not a world war yet, but we're at war because ISIS has declared war on us. In World War II, the government went to the private sector. The government asked the private sector for help in doing things that the government could not do. The private sector complied. That is what I am suggesting. Trust me, there are, for example, there's a whole company called Palantir that does nothing but derive and create algorithms to search through big data. We're not using their capabilities. For heaven's sake, some of this is just ineptitude. I mean, I can go onto social media and check out my granddaughter's new boyfriend, but the Department of Homeland Security can't figure out that it needs to be tracking these jihadi websites. Some of this is a failure to keep up with technology. Some of this is bureaucratic ineptitude, and a great deal of this is an administration that does not understand the urgency of the situation, and therefore this administration has not reached out actively to the private sector and said, we need help.
The main super PAC supporting you in this campaign, super PAC, so it's separate, is now running an ad which links you pretty directly to Margaret Thatcher. Here's a clip.
Margaret Thatcher once said that she was not content to manage the decline of a great nation. Neither am I.
Ms. Fiorina, respectfully, isn't that a little over the top?
Well, first of all, it's not my ad.
No, I
it's the
understand.
Super PAC's ad. Secondly, many people have commented on the comparison. I'm flattered by it, frankly. Margaret Thatcher was a great leader for her nation at a pivotal and a perilous time. And so I find the comparison flattering, but that's up to others to say whether that comparison is justified.
But I mean, they have a quote from you in the speech where you're talking about Margaret Thatcher.
I'm quoting Margaret Thatcher. I quote her frequently.
I understand, but then sort of comparing her hardline view and your own. You talk, and this is on your website repeatedly, tested conservative leader. Margaret Thatcher won the Falklands War. Margaret Thatcher helped win the Cold War. Margaret Thatcher stood with George H.W. Bush, Bush 41, in kicking Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. Again, respectfully, how have you been tested as a conservative?
Well, first of all, Margaret Thatcher did none of those things you mentioned until she had been elected prime minister of her nation. So by that definition, she wasn't tested either.
I understand, but she wasn't called it either until she had been elected.
I have been tested in many ways. Personally, I've beaten breast cancer. I buried a child to addiction. Professionally, you cannot go from being a secretary of a 9-person real estate firm to the chief executive of the largest technology company in the world without having been over and over and over. I'm being tested in this campaign as well. So nobody needs to worry about my toughness. Nobody needs to worry about whether or not I've been tested. And I think more to the point, Chris, these pivotal times require something other than just a politician. I understand the economy. I understand the world. I have a lot of foreign policy experience. I understand bureaucracies. I understand technology. And I understand leadership. I've made tough calls in tough times and been held accountable. And I think that is the kind of leadership the American people need now to produce results.
Finally, when I told people I was going to be talking to you, a lot of them raised this point, which is that there was a point when you were really high in the polls and you have slipped considerably from that point. Let's put up some numbers. In Iowa, I know you don't like national polls, so we're going to look at early state polls. In Iowa, the latest Real Clear Politics average shows you in 7th place at 2.6%. That's down from 3rd at 10% back in early October. In New Hampshire, you're now running 8th with 4.7%, down from 2nd with more than 14%. You're a numbers person. What happened? Why haven't you been able to hold on to and to build on what a couple of months ago was a really strong position?
Well, you know, it's interesting. If you look at all the polls, what you see is there are kind of 4 people up at the top: Trump, Rubio, Cruz, Carson. And then there's me and about 3 governors. I'm perfectly happy with that position right now, honestly, because when I started this race, I was 17 out of 16. The pollsters didn't even ask my name because so few people knew me. And frankly, all the pundits and D.C. insiders thought I'd never be standing on the main debate stage. I am, and I'm going to stay right there. I know what I see out there in Iowa, and I see building crowds. And you know what? I just came from Iowa yesterday. You know what I heard over and over and over again? Now I'm really paying attention. People make up their minds late. And if the polls at this stage in earlier races were true, we've had President Howard Dean, President Rudy Giuliani, and by the way, we would have already had President Hillary Clinton.
Ms. Fiorina, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming in. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
Safe travels on
And
the
I met
campaign
your
trail.
adorable grandchildren. You're a lucky man.
Well, thank you. Yes, we should say the Wallace grandkids, this is called a deep tease, will be on the program.
You're in for a treat, folks. They're really cute.
Yes, they all take after other people, not me.